Her name was Sarah, and she woke up before the sun that morning. Not because she had to, because something felt off. She lay still for a moment, listening to the old farmhouse breathe. The floorboards, the rafters, the soft sound of wind moving through the eaves. But this morning, there was no wind. The air was wrong. Too quiet. Too cold for June. She pulled her wool blanket tighter, the same one her grandmother had made years before, heavy and rough and real. She sat up, swung her feet down to the cold floor, and stepped outside. She stopped at the edge of the porch. Didn't move. Couldn't. The ground was white. Not frost, not morning dew. Snow. In June. She stood there a long moment. The kind of moment where your mind tries to fix what your eyes are seeing, tries to tell you there's been a mistake, that you're still half asleep. But she wasn't. It was June, and the ground was white. Behind her, through the walls, she could hear her family still sleeping. Her mother, her father, her younger brother Thomas, who always slept too late and ate too much. A normal family. A small farm in the hills of western Massachusetts, not far from the Connecticut River Valley. 40 acres, a few cows, a kitchen garden her mother tended like it was sacred ground. The kind of life that depends on seasons behaving the way they should. Plant in spring, grow in summer, harvest before the cold returns. Simple rules. Until they aren't. She looked out across the cornfield. The stalks were young, maybe knee-high, fragile and green and not ready for this. Not ready for any of this. She already knew, I think, right then. Not everything, but enough. Enough to feel it, deep in the bones. Something had shifted. And whatever this was, it wasn't going away quickly. She stood there a little longer, snow falling soft, the sky the color of old pewter. And somewhere inside her, a quiet question began to form. What do you do when the world stops following its own rules? They didn't know it yet. But summer would never come. She didn't say anything that morning. Some things you don't say out loud, not right away. You hold them close, turn them over in your hands like something fragile. Instead, she went back inside, closed the door carefully, as if that could keep the cold out. Her mother was already awake, standing at the hearth, stirring something, hands moving the way they always moved, steady, purposeful, the same motion she'd made 10,000 times before. There's something about routine. It makes the world feel stable, even when it isn't. Her father came in from the barn not long after, boots heavy on the floorboards, face unreadable. They talked about small things over breakfast. The fence post on the north side that needed fixing. Whether the Hendersons down the road had seen their dog. Whether Thomas would remember his chores this time. Not the snow. Not yet. I think they all saw it. All three of them. They just chose not to name it. Because once you name something, it becomes real. And real things can break you. This was their life. Not glamorous, not easy, but it was theirs. They had come to this land with almost nothing. Her father's father had cleared the first trees himself, had broken the first soil with a hand plow and a borrowed mule. You plant in hope. You wait in faith. And if you're lucky, you harvest enough to last. That's the deal. Not written anywhere, but everyone understands it. Summer was everything. Not just a warmth, not just the longer days. It was time. Time for the corn to grow. Time for the rye and the barley to fill out. Time for the earth to give back what you'd put into it. Without summer, nothing moves forward. I've always believed this. People don't fear winter the most. They fear a summer that never comes. Later that day, she went back out to the field. The snow had started to melt, just enough to make you doubt yourself. She walked the rows slowly, knelt down beside the corn, pressed her fingers into the soil. Cold. Too cold. Not the cool of a spring morning, the cold of something that hadn't decided to let go. She stayed there longer than she should have, watching the ground, waiting, as if the earth might explain itself. It didn't. The next morning was the same, and the morning after that. Her father said it would pass. He said May could be strange, and June wasn't always warm straight away. He said his father had seen late frosts before. And maybe he believed that. I think he needed to. Because if he didn't, what else was there to hold on to? They planted anyway. Seed after seed, row after row. That's the thing about hope. It doesn't wait for certainty. It just moves forward. Days passed, then weeks. The sun came out sometimes, but it didn't feel warm, not really. Not the kind of warmth that reaches the soil and stays there. Not the kind that makes things grow. At night, the cold returned. Quietly, no warning. She started waking before dawn again, not from habit, from worry. She would walk out to the field, barely breathing, and look. Every time hoping for something different. Every time seeing the same thing. Frost. Thin at first, then thicker, like a slow decision being made by something larger than any of them. She touched the leaves one morning. They had been soft before, alive. Now they felt brittle, like they could break without making a sound. Some already had. Curled edges, darkened tips, the kind of damage you don't notice at once, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Her mother stopped talking as much at dinner. Her father started staying out late, fixing fences that didn't really need fixing, repairing tools that weren't really broken. People do that when they're trying not to think. I've noticed that. Silence grows when answers don't. One morning, she didn't even need to check. She already knew. Still, she went, walked the same path, stopped at the same place, looked down. The corn wasn't growing. It was holding on. And even that didn't look like it would last. She knelt there a long time, not touching anything, just watching, as if the truth might change if she waited long enough. It didn't. And something settled in, deep and slow. Not panic, something heavier. Something that stays. She turned back toward the house. took a few steps, then stopped. Because a thought crossed her mind, quiet but clear. If this isn't winter, then what is it? She didn't have an answer. No one did. She didn't sleep much those nights. You know that kind of wakefulness. Not restless exactly, just waiting. Lying in the dark and listening to the house, listening for any sign that things had shifted. That warmth had crept back in while you weren't looking. It hadn't. She lay on her side one night, stomach hollow, not yet from hunger but from worry, which is its own kind of hunger. And she thought about the field, about what had been planted there, about her father's hands in the soil back in April, pressing each seed in one at a time. He had hummed while he worked, a low, tuneless sound, the kind of thing you do when you're content and don't even realize it. She wondered if he would hum like that again. The change at the table came slowly. She noticed it first in the way her mother served the food. Not all at once, little changes. A smaller ladle, a thinner pour. Soup that was somehow both familiar and different. The same flavor, less of it. At first it felt temporary, a few days of adjustment. Then you go back. But they didn't go back. The bowls stayed light. The bread was sliced thinner, each piece just enough, never more. Her father started eating slower. Not because he wanted to, because there wasn't much. He would pause between bites, stare at the middle distance, as if stretching the time between bites might somehow stretch the meal itself. I've seen this before, not in person, but in the stories that come down through generations. Hunger doesn't always come in like a storm. Sometimes it settles quietly, pulls up a chair, and stays. Thomas, her brother, stopped complaining about portions. He was 14, an age when boys are always hungry, always loud about it. When he went quiet, that's when she understood how serious it had become. Silence replaces complaints when things get bad enough. One evening, her mother set out supper. 4 bowls, 4 portions. She looked at each of them before she sat down. That look, measuring, calculating without a word. There is a kind of mathematics that families do in desperate times. It happens without discussion, without announcement. Who needs more? Who can take less? Who is working hardest? Who is youngest? No one talks about it, but everyone feels it. That evening, Sarah pushed her bowl away. Quietly, no drama. Said she wasn't hungry. Said she'd had a big midday meal. She hadn't. Her mother nodded, too quickly, said nothing. That's the part that stays with you. Not the hunger itself, but the agreement, the silent kind, the kind where a mother accepts her daughter's lie because the alternative is worse. Her father didn't look up. I think that's when hunger becomes something else, something beyond the physical, because every bite starts to mean something. If you take it, someone else doesn't. If you leave it, you pay later. There's no right answer, only smaller losses. She lay awake that night, stomach empty, the house quieter than she'd ever heard it. And one question circling back over and over. How long before this becomes something we can't come back from? She saw it in the way her father stood at the door one evening. Longer than usual. Not going out, not sitting down, just standing there, looking at nothing, or looking at everything. That's how decisions begin sometimes. Not with words, with stillness. Her mother folded the same cloth twice, then again, hands moving while her mind was somewhere else entirely. They had already decided, I think. They just hadn't said it yet. Because saying it makes it real. That night after supper, what little supper there was, her father spoke. His voice was quiet, careful, like a man choosing every word for its weight. They couldn't stay, not through another winter like this. The crops had failed. The stores were nearly gone. The soil wouldn't give them what they needed, not this year, maybe not next year either. His brother had written from Ohio, said the land was different there, said things grew. No argument, no raised voices, no one pushed back. Because deep down, they all knew he was right. Sometimes the hardest choices don't sound loud. They feel final. The next morning, things began to move. Not fast, but with the quiet momentum of something that had already been decided in the heart before it was decided out loud. A bag, then another, only what mattered. She stood in her room for a long time before she started packing. Looked at the small things on the windowsill. A smooth stone she'd found at the river when she was 8. A pressed wildflower in a cracked frame. A small wooden horse her father had carved one winter, years ago, before things got hard. How do you decide what your life is worth carrying? She took the wooden horse. Left the stone. Outside, the field was still. The corn, what was left of it, stood in crooked rows. Some stalks had fallen over. Some were still trying. She stood beside her father for a moment. Neither of them spoke. He looked at those rows a long time. Then he turned away. That was enough. They weren't just leaving the farm. They were leaving everything they knew. She took a breath, cold, sharp, and stepped forward. Not because she was ready, because she had to. She didn't look back for long. Some places you carry better when you don't stare at them. They walked west, the road ahead uncertain, the past behind, already becoming something quieter, a shape you hold inside instead of in your hands. Days passed. The cold followed them. She asked once how far this would last, how long before the air felt different, how long before there was enough. No one answered, because no one knew. And maybe that's the hardest part. Not the suffering itself, but the not knowing when it ends. Not knowing if there's a line ahead of you, and if so, how far. They met others on the road. More than she'd expected. Families with children, old men traveling alone, young couples with everything they owned loaded into a cart, a woman carrying an infant walking with the quiet determination of someone who has made peace with the road ahead. She looked at their faces, tried to read them. What she saw wasn't defeat, not exactly. It was a kind of grim persistence, a we will do what we must that doesn't announce itself. Some had come from Connecticut, some from Vermont, some from as far as New Hampshire. All of them going west, all of them fleeing the same thing. A cold that wouldn't lift, a summer that hadn't come, crops that had given up before the harvest. They would later call this year 1816 by a name that said everything. The year without a summer. And yet none of them, not Sarah, not her family, not a single soul on that long road west, knew why. They didn't know about the mountain. They couldn't have. On an island in the Dutch East Indies, a place called Sumbawa that most Americans couldn't have found on a map, there stands a volcano. Adds to it, I should say. Its name is Mount Tambora. And in April of the previous year, 1815, it erupted. Not like any eruption in living memory. Not like anything human history had fully encountered. The explosion was heard 2,000 miles away. People on islands across the region thought they were being attacked by cannons. Soldiers were sent out to investigate, only to find nothing. Just sound traveling across the water. The mountain sent so much ash and gas into the upper atmosphere that the sky over the island went dark for 3 days. 3 days of complete darkness. Not twilight, not overcast. Dark. Villages were buried. A local language, an entire human language, was lost forever. The people who spoke it were gone. At least 71,000 people died from the eruption itself. Tens of thousands more in the months that followed, from the ash that destroyed crops, poisoned water, killed livestock across the island and its neighbors. It was the largest volcanic eruption in recorded human history. And then the ash kept rising. Higher than any eruption before it had sent material. So high it entered the stratosphere, the upper layer of the atmosphere, far above the weather we live in. And there it stayed, drifting, circling the globe. A thin, nearly invisible veil of sulfur particles spread across the sky of the entire planet. You couldn't see it from the ground. There was nothing to point to. No cloud, no smoke, no sign. Just a slow dimming. A fraction less sunlight reaching the surface. A fraction less warmth. But fractions matter when you're talking about the thin margin of temperature that separates a growing season from a failed one. Fractions are everything. In Europe, the harvest failed. Famine followed in France, Germany, Ireland. Riots broke out in cities. A young writer named Mary Shelley, stuck indoors during a cold, sunless summer in Switzerland, began writing a story about a creature made from death and brought back to life in a world that didn't want it. She would call it Frankenstein. On the other side of the ocean, in the hills of New England, a young woman named Sarah woke up one morning in June and found snow on the ground, and didn't understand why. And now she was walking west. The mountain had spoken a year earlier. The world had listened without knowing it was listening. I think about Sarah sometime. About that morning on the porch. The white ground. The cornfield. About the bowl she pushed away at supper so her brother could eat. About the wooden horse she packed, and the stone she left behind. She didn't make history. She didn't sign anything or lead anything or leave her name in any record I've ever found. She just lived through it, the way most people live through the great events of their time, without knowing they're doing it, without any map of what's coming. She walked west because she had to, because of a volcano she would never know the name of, on an island she would never see, whose ash had circled the earth and reached her field and stolen her summer, without ever introducing itself. That's the thing about history, about the way large forces move through small lives. The causes are almost always invisible. The consequences are always real. You feel the cold. You don't see the mountain. You know the summer didn't come. You don't know why. And you do what people have always done when the world stops making sense. You pack what matters. You step forward. You trust that somewhere ahead, things grow again. She made it to Ohio. I believe that, though I can't prove it. I believe she planted again the following spring. I believe she knelt in new soil and pressed seeds in with her hands the way her father had. I believe she heard him hum. And I believe she understood, finally, what that sound meant. Not contentment. Survival. The quiet, stubborn human refusal to give up. That's what this story is, really. Not the volcano. Not the year without a summer. Not the history books. It's a woman pushing her bowl away so her brother can eat. It's a father standing at a door, making a decision in silence. It's a family on a road they didn't choose, heading toward a life they couldn't see. Moving forward. Because that's what people do. Even when, especially when, the summer doesn't come. How many things shape our lives that we never understand? How many mountains on islands we'll never visit have already reached us? I don't know the answer to that. But I think about Sarah. And I think she would say, it doesn't matter. You wake up. You step outside. And you keep going.